Vietnam know how to defeat the Mongols? Yes. And not just once, they defeated the Mongols 3 times in a row with stunning victories that shook the entire world and forced the great medieval powers to recognize a small country called Đại Việt, whose territory at the time was only 160 the size of the Mongol Empire. So how did the Vietnamese finally manage to defeat the Mongols? In this final invasion, researchers were truly astonished by the scale of the campaign. The Yuan dynasty mobilized over 300,000 troops, a massive number, especially for East Asia in the 13th century. Even though the Mongol forces were thoroughly prepared and entered Đại Việt with a massive army, General Trần Hưng Đạo, who directly led the Vietnamese military, calmly stated, "This time the enemy will be easier to defeat." Under the leadership of King Trần Nhân Tông and the retired Emperor Trần Thanh Tông, the Đại Việt court chose a diplomatic approach, gentle and patient, aiming to buy time for military preparation. At that time, the Mongol army entered Đại Việt from 3 major directions at once. The first force came through Yuan, attacking the mountainous northwestern regions of Đại Việt, commanded by General Ao Luchi. The second and main force, led by Prince Togon, included Vietnamese defector Tran Ik Tak and several top Mongol generals. They crossed the northern border. The third force, led by Admiral Omar, approached from the eastern sea. Following behind was General Zhang Wenhu, who brought nearly 500 warships and 70 supply boats carrying rice, salt, dried meat, and preserved beef, enough provisions for months of warfare. Thanks to the strategic retreat tactic used by the Tran dynasty, the initial advance of the Mongol army went fairly smoothly. The main force, commanded by Prince Togon, quickly entered Thang Long. But just like the previous 2 invasions, Thang Long was nothing but an empty city. No soldiers, no civilians, no food. Meanwhile, Admiral Omar led the Mongol Navy across the sea and pushed deep into the Van Ninh and Mong Kai regions, facing almost no significant resistance. It seemed as if victory was within reach. But at sea, in the area of Van Don, a skilled Tran general named Tran Can Du launched an ambush and destroyed the supply fleet commanded by Zhang Wenhu, which had been left behind. When news of the defeated Van Don reached Thang Long, it threw Togon into a true crisis. His army of tens of thousands, now deep inside enemy territory, had no supply lines. Winter was approaching fast. The soldiers were starving. The horses were starving. Morale collapsed. At the same time, Admiral Omar still didn't know about the loss of the supply fleet. He remained stationed at the lower section of the Bach Dang River, waiting for reinforcements. But nothing ever came. Eventually, he had no choice but to order a retreat by river. What no one realized was that Trần Hưng Đạo was already prepared for all. Knowing the Mongol army's escape route, General Trần Hưng Đạo and his forces planned a decisive strike on the Bach Dang River. At the same time, Emperor Trần Nhân Tông ordered repeated attacks on the retreating Mongols as they moved from Van Kiep back toward Bach Dang. Meanwhile, Trần Hưng Đạo took advantage of the large tidal differences on parts of the Bach Dang River. His troops drove sharp wooden stakes into the riverbed and covered them with straw and brush to hide them beneath the water. On April 8, 1288, Omar led the Mongol Navy to the junction between the Da Bach and Gia rivers. He first sent troops up the Gia River to probe the area, but they were blocked by strong Đại Việt forces. Seeing this, the Mongols moved forward along the Da Bach River, without much suspicion. In the early morning of April 9, 1288, the Mongol fleet neared Trần Hưng Mountain as the tide was rising. Trần Hưng Đạo launched a small probing attack and pretended to retreat. Believing the enemy was fleeing, Omar ordered a full pursuit. At that moment, the tide suddenly turned and began to fall rapidly. The Mongol ships, having chased too far into the river, were now trapped among the hidden wooden stakes. Many ships hit the stakes and sank. That was the moment Trần Hưng Đạo gave the order for a full-scale counterattack. Đại Việt forces attacked from all directions. The navy from the Yuan River joined with ground forces from Trần Hưng Mountain to cut off the Mongols from behind. The Bach Dang River became a fierce battlefield. General Phan Thiep tried to land troops on Trần Hưng Mountain, but they were met with intense resistance from an ambush. The Mongol troops panicked, ships collided, soldiers drowned either from sinking ships or being crushed while trying to retreat. The brutal fighting lasted for hours. The Mongol side became more and more disorganized. Trần Hưng Đạo, together with both emperors of the Trần dynasty, personally led elite troops into battle. The Đại Việt army was full of spirit, while the Mongols were in complete panic. The battlefield collapsed. The Trần troops fought with overwhelming force. Blood turned the river red. The result was one of the most devastating defeats the Mongols ever suffered. Nearly 60,000 soldiers were killed or captured. 400 Mongol ships were seized and more than 200 were sunk. Omar was captured alive. General Phan Thiep was killed. When news of the crushing defeat at Bach Dang reached Togon, he immediately ordered a retreat through the mountains. But the retreating army was constantly ambushed. A rumor spread that 300,000 Đại Việt troops were hiding in ambush, further damaging the already crumbling morale of the Mongol forces. Togon had to hide inside a bronze tube and let his soldiers carry him through dangerous areas. His main force was shattered. When he returned home, the Yuan court punished him severely, stripping him of his power and essentially exiling him. As for Omar, though he was captured alive and later released by the Trần dynasty, he drowned at sea on his way back to China. That marked the end of the Mongol Yuan Empire's dream of conquering Đại Việt.